All right, good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is given in accordance with the New Jersey Public Meetings Act, and it is done by placing a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building, and also by publishing it in the newspaper that is provided for notices by the township. And it is also posted on the township website. And we are being streamed live on Channel 34 and are available on YouTube, both live and on demand. Excuse me. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, this meeting, and that means that the board has the powers and the procedures resembling a court of law, and that we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board can legally consider in reaching a decision in decorum appropriate for a court. Room should be maintained at all times. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham's excused. Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz is excused. Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Ms. Willis.
Here.
Chair Nguyen.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson is excused. And Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, we have minutes from our October 22nd meeting. May 22nd. I think we took care of the October meetings already. It's totally misfire. Can't even blame the dyslexia on that.
Are there any comments on the May 22nd meeting minutes? Okay.
Number 3. Sorry. Number 3 on page 2. I think, well, first of all, the second line there, it should be development to station areas, right? Not in. Anyway, but my beef really is with the word intensify. I don't think anyone was talking about intensifying any development. I think I would say we would shift development to station areas other than Bay Street. You know,
Shifting it from
what all the development that's around Bay Street, make it in other areas. I believe that's what the subcommittee was talking about. No one was talking about intensifying development.
Maybe we should say shift the focus, because you can't move
Okay,
development, but you could shift
whatever.
the focus.
Yes, I just want to get rid of the word intensify. And I'm not done. One
sorry.
more, yeah. And one more, number 7, the third line, zip cars as a tool for reducing parking are no longer appropriate. So it's recommendations are no longer appropriate. So the word
Okay.
is are, not is.
Okay.
And number 14, I just would take out that second sentence and just put better signage directing vehicles to the township's parking area is needed. To me, it just reads a bit better.
You just make a comment on that?
No.
What was your second comment, Carmen?
The second one was number 7. It should read, second line starting, recommendations are no longer appropriate. Recommendations to allow car sharing, blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
So it's are.
Okay. And I'm gonna disagree with the suggested change about intensifying, because I think I did suggest intensifying development around the other train stations. I know I did.
Okay, but, all right, well,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we all agree, but yeah.
We don't have to agree, but
Yeah, you
it can
did
be
say
recorded
that.
in the minutes, yeah.
Okay.
So you want me to keep the intensify?
Well, if it's not several members, right, if I was speaking solo, it would be me, but
Then
Yeah.
why don't I say one member suggested that the township should intensify development at station areas, and other members suggested that the focus be shifted.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that works for me.
Feeling out there, Jacob?
It's good that we agree.
Okay. Are there any other changes?
It is on 12, same question. This is on the old exemption for change of use in C1 and C3 for buildings, and then allowing a one-time 15% increase in floor area. Was it several members, or did we decide to reinstate that exemption? I don't recall if it was.
I don't think we didn't take a vote on it.
May we take a vote? Because this is something that I think was a mistake. I've said this before. That exemption created our downtown in a lot of ways. It allowed our older historic buildings to remain viable through change of use and modest increases. I think it was a mistake that it was changed. I think it was very reactive. So I don't know if this would be a proper vote or not, since those members that were here at this meeting may not be here. But I think if it goes in, well, personally, I think if it goes in stronger than just several suggested that, it doesn't have as much impact as saying the planning board suggests.
Well, maybe.
Unless we just delay it until,
Well, yeah, because this is just the minutes. Obviously, we can suggest, I could change it to.
oh, because we haven't,
This is just-
Clarify, but that both, just like we did with the last one.
oh, we have to write a memo.
And we haven't taken any official action.
Oh, okay.
We were just receiving information.
All right.
So if we can just clarify,
I could say strongly suggested.
Well, but it's still, it could be a minority strongly suggest, doesn't really get you anywhere,
Of
right?
course, we won't know until
Right.
we get there, or if
Yeah.
the board wants to take action on this one item rather than wait until the entire reexamination report is done. If you want to make, have the subcommittee draw up an ordinance, and then, there's a lot of things that you can do. If,
I'd be open for that, because
Yeah.
this, the removal of this exemption is actually against what was in the master plan.
yeah,
The established master plan applauded its use, and so not only did it happen, it also happened with no consideration for the master plan, so I'd be open to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I thought,
So-
are we on zoning? I thought. Oh, I was thinking the zoning, that zoning committee that we
this would
have.
be this-
would-
I think this would be the zoning subcommittee,
Okay,
which is
yeah.
Carol, Carmel, and Tony. Just to, we could even do this.
Right now, can't we just say as a committee?
Well, probably should meet.
I think we have to draft the
Oh, right.
language.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can meet remotely. I can write something up and
All right,
send
we
it
can,
to
we
you.
can do that.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
All right.
And then we could present it at the next planning board meeting, okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But just one more, looking at
Hey,
12.
Let me write this down, though.
Okay.
On my, zoning subcommittee recommendation, all right,
Mhm.
regarding parking. Okay.
And
What
ju-
should-
Just in terms of the minutes, you have required and then applied on the next page. It's either one or the other.
What number?
Oh, 12, we're looking at 12 again. The last word on page 2 is required, so I would cross that out and put applied, which is what you have on the next page.
Increase in-
Or cross applied out and leave required in.
Yeah, applied would have to come out.
Okay.
All right.
Motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
There we go.
Abstentions?
I know.
Are we voting on a new secretary tonight?
all right, we have a resolution on 103 Grove Street.
Can I ask a question? Once again, it's not on the agenda, but what happened with that indemnification letter to Mr. Burr? And you never heard from him yet? I guess he's involved in other things.
You think?
But I hope that, we'll continue to follow up on that. Right?
If you want me to, I will. I mean, no disrespect to Mr. Burr, but sometimes I have noted that, he is overwhelmed, at least in my humble opinion, and he can't deal with all the things that are being thrown at him. So I'll follow up.
Or it's actually more a question for the council, I think, than Burr.
Right, but somebody's got to.
Lead it, right. Mhm.
Yeah, someone has to put the bee in the bonnet of the council.
Yeah.
to do that,
I
so.
think what you can do is also send it to the township manager. So
Who
it's
is
not,
the township manager these days?
it's,
Brian
it's the-
Scantlebury.
Brian Scantlebury.
Oh, he's the.
He's
he-
the
he-
acting manager.
Acting,
Mhm.
okay.
So that's what I do, copy
Mhm.
both Paul and Brian.
Gotcha. I can do that easily as well, if you want me to. I did, I don't recall, I think I sent a copy of my letter to the
I
board.
think you sent it to the council.
So if
yeah.
I did that, then, fine,
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
okay.
I know lawyers always like to get their correspondence from other lawyers, this lawyer to lawyer.
That's really very low, okay?
Okay, so that's what'll happen.
It gives it a certain gravitas.
And keeps us out of trouble.
103 Grove.
103 Grove, we don't have a resolution.
Well, we have it, but they are still engaged in conversations with TNJ. They have, I think the last time we talked about this, I expressed that they may come back before you with what they call a safety plan. If they somehow get kicked off that 9.9 feet by TNJ, they would propose an alternate scenario.
So do we carry this from meeting to meeting?
We don't need to.
What do we do with this resolution? Because we took action, but it's not memorialized.
There's no time limit for it in the MLUL.
I thought there was a time limit.
Even if there is, and I don't think there is, they're not going to impose any requirement on us about that.
But, the board took action, and that's memorialized by this resolution. So that's what's being held up. There's
Right.
no action.
They're requesting that we take no action. It's their application, and they're requesting that we took action, we took official action, but we did not finish the action. We didn't do a memorialized resolution.
And I think we can take some time to reasonably accommodate their request. I think they're,
Right.
but right now, we've only carried it, this would be, what, the second time that we've carried it? Or the
It's
third?
actually probably a few more than that. I mean.
It's been a while.
Look, I'll do this. If Mr. Skolnick says to me that they're gonna have a safety plan, and they've already I think they already sent you correspondence saying that they're considering coming back before the board on an amended site plan yet again. If that's not gonna happen in the near future, then I'll ask him if we can withdraw it without prejudice.
Well, let's tell them that, we'll take action on this at the next meeting. We'll defer it to the next meeting, and he's got to let us know one way or the other what he wants to, what he would like to do, what he's going to go forward. We just don't want to just leave it floating in limbo.
I'll certainly do that, but his hands are sort of tied because the things move rather slowly at TNJ, but I'll mention that to him, and he'll have a choice. He'll either ask if we can withdraw the resolution for temporarily without prejudice to putting it back on the agenda.
Well, can you, I guess, because the resolution's never
But the action-
adopted,
Yeah, the action's already been taken, so he would have to do something that would make us want to do something with that action.
My thought,
So-
my real thought is that he is going to come back before you with the safety plan, because he's getting nowhere
Well-
fast with TNJ.
So wouldn't then you'd have to come back with an amended plan?
Correct. And I think
An
he's going to do
amended
that.
application.
And that's what he will do. He knows that very well.
So, and that wouldn't, if he's gonna do that, then we can go ahead and memorialize the resolution on what we've done already, and then he'll just come back with an amended
Right.
plan.
I'll give him that option, because I don't think he wants us to do that, because there's language in the resolution that his lenders find problematic.
But I don't see how we cannot do the resolution because we're not gonna change what we did in the past.
Agreed.
It's done.
Right.
So
Agreed.
this is just a memorialization of it. We might temper some of the conditions, I guess, or what?
No, I
It's
don't
been,
think I
it's
wanna
been a
do that.
while, so I don't even know what language
Yeah,
we're
I'm
talking
not
about
gonna-
off the top of my head now.
I'm going
But-
to use a legal term. I'm not going to futz with that resolution because the board approved it.
Glad I still remember my Latin.
We should memorialize it.
I'll express that to him and leave him with the option and tell him that that's what's going to happen at the next meeting unless he gives us some guidance and says what he
Yeah.
wants us to do.
Because we're not, they can always come back and amend it. There's
And
no-
I think he's going to do that, so no harm, no foul.
So we'll
And if
carry
there's
this.
something, if there's some language in there that's gonna give him a problem, let us know what that language is. There, you know, as we all know, there's different ways to say things, so, I mean, and still be accurate. So, what's, you know, but we need to do something. If
There
it's
ain't,
been-
there ain't too many ways to express this that will make his blenders happy, but I'll discuss that with him.
Ultimately, that's his and his client's problem.
That's correct. That's correct. But I do know, because I've been on the phone with him and his client on several occasions, I know that they are trying in, I wouldn't say unusual, but they are trying to get the actual easement from transit
Mhm.
using avenues that, political avenues,
Yeah, well-
basically.
Well, tell us what he's doing, you know, give us a reason to carry it.
Okay.
Some more. Because right now, I mean, we just don't really have a good reason to leave it in limbo. And I understand Janice's discomfort, and again, it's a memorialization. We took the action already, so.
So by the next meeting, I will have clear guidance, or before the next meeting. I'll have
Or you
clear
can come
guidance.
and talk to us.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that opportunity, John. I just want you to know that. I appreciate that I can come here and talk with you.
No, he could come and talk to us.
No, he
Not
could.
you. This is not your problem either.
You're already here.
This is not your problem either. This is his problem.
I will extend him that
Yeah,
invitation.
Yeah, he can come and talk to us. and-
So we'll carry that to July 10th. Our next meeting
Okay.
is July 10th.
Okay. And then our next item on the agenda is a minor site plan application with a variance for 499 Bloomfield Avenue. This is Richard Grabowski's application, but they failed to notice properly, so I believe that this is going to be
It's a do-over.
re-noticed for July 10th.
Okay.
But I haven't gotten confirmation of that yet. We'll see. And if anybody's interested, it will be re-noticed. And that brings us up to the discussion of the master plan reexamination report. So I hope everybody has the latest report, which is the Transportation and Mobility Subcommittee report. Do you need some?
No, you copy the bills.
Oh, these? Yeah.
I didn't get them.
Oh, I forgot to attach them, I'm sorry.
Is mine in there? Just check and see.
Okay. So the Transportation and Mobility Subcommittee included Tony, Keith, Jake, and John, and myself. We've met, I think, at least twice, once or twice. I'm losing. Once, to talk about transportation and mobility issues, particularly since the Unified Plan was adopted in 2016, 2015. So, as again, we started off with an evaluation of the issues that are identified in the Unified Plan and evaluated whether or not those issues are still valid, which is one of the requirements for doing a master plan reexamination report. Just so anybody knows, I've been reading some comments that the planning board doesn't have the proper vision to redo their master plan. We're not redoing the master plan. This is a statutorily required review of the township's land development policies. So we're looking at all of the elements of the master plan to determine, whether or not they're still valid and what needs to be changed. And at the end of the day, it's almost, we'll come up with some recommendations and certain elements may need to be changed or not. And that's essentially what the statute requires the board to do, and I know all of you know that here. just want to make sure that the public, because they do listen, understands that we're not redoing the master plan, and that's why there's not a lot of public input. It's just a discussion of what's in there right now. So back when the master plan was done, it was, we did our public outreach starting in 2010. It was over 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And one of the issues was, number one, it is difficult to live in town without at least one private car. And one of the things that we evaluated, and we did look at statistics, we looked at information that's available on the census to determine how many cars per household, and where are the households that don't have cars, don't have vehicles. And you can see on table 1 in our report, we indicated the number of households per census tract, the percentage that do not have cars. And I apologize, the map is not as legible on page 2 as I would have liked. This is the same map that was presented to the subcommittee. We have not been able to access our maps to update them and make them more legible, so we'll get there eventually, but right now we're locked into this map. But if you look, we do have the percentage points, the percentages where there are fewer vehicles per household. For instance, in Census Tract 162, it's less than in Census Tract 161, there's 59 households, that's 5.3%, do not have a private vehicle. Other census tracts normally are basically around the Bay Street train station. That's where the highest census tracts are.
Janice, I just wanted to say, when you look at that figure 1 and you have things described as census tracts, and then you have a map that doesn't have the streets, it's very hard for someone to figure out where you're talking about.
I understand completely.
But
and
I know that you can identify streets by census tract, so I guess we would need to know that, or the public would, or
We
even me.
will-
When I look at this, I'm wondering where on earth are these places? And I can guess, but, yeah.
We'll get there. We are unable to access our mapping data,
Okay.
okay?
Mhm.
So back when we did this in May, we were able to create the maps. We met. I asked to have it updated so we could have the streets and make it easier to see. We are unable to do that at this time.
Okay, but I'm just asking, so the next go-round here, instead of having census tracts, you'll have areas of the town so people can identify what areas or streets you're talking
You'll
about.
be able to see what
Carmel will
streets
have
are
that.
in
Right.
what
Carmel will
census
have
Yeah,
tracts.
exactly. That's exactly what I'm
So it's
Carmel will-
coming.
We'll
Yeah.
have the map.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, I apologize.
Yeah, no, I
We could-
mean,
you know what,
right.
we could table this and
No,
this is a
it's-
good
No,
time.
I'm just giving you some suggestions, and I didn't know if this was the final figure, table 1 that you're looking at. You're talking about the map, which is on the next page. So, table 1 is what it is as well, but
Well,
without
the-
any identifying streets.
Well, the census, the information that Janice has in the table, I think she took it from the census, which is leading it, which is grouping it by tract. But when you go to the map, you will see in these areas where the tracts are defined, and you'll be able to see the streets within those tracts.
In the
So-
next map.
In
Yeah,
the next
yeah,
map.
yeah, that's
Right.
fine. Mhm.
I think you understand, this is not the way I intended to present it, but it's what I have to work with.
All we can do at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. Okay.
I'm finding even the font size is really small. I'm having a problem reading the memo.
So
Anyways-
let me just to understand the table, though.
Yeah,
Okay, so what this is telling us is that there's roughly 8% of households do not have a private vehicle.
exactly.
That's about it.
And
And
there's the ones that don't have don't have a private vehicle are the census tracts 167 and 168. and
Which are totally by
170
Lackawanna Plaza, as I recall. Is that correct?
They're
They're in
basically
that
near
Bay
the-
Street, yeah.
I believe one of those is actually much closer to Valley and Bloom.
It could be.
Yeah.
But
The
they're
other
all
end of
close
Bloomfield
to the New Jersey Transit
Yeah.
line.
The one that's at 18.3%.
And I think important to consider
It's
too.
160. 168.
Is they're generally close to a grocery store, so you have that uptick in Upper Montclair as well, where you have 5.5% in an otherwise relatively low-density environment, because you can walk to the Kings. And so I think that probably is correlated.
Plus, there's apartment buildings there. I think it's correlated to apartment buildings, yeah.
Yeah, probably that's where it's higher.
Mhm.
Okay. So I guess at the end of the day, we wanted to quantify that issue, that there are areas in the township where it is possible to live without a car. That's clearly what,
People are living there without cars.
in certain areas.
Yeah,
If you
in
have
certain
good,
areas.
and it makes sense, if you have
Mhm.
good public transportation, you don't necessarily need a car.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make the distinction, though, between living without a car and it being easy to do so, because there are plenty of people who do so because they have to. There's a lot of service workers who just can't afford a car, but they need to live in town because they need to be able to bike to work. And so I think it's important not to take the fact that there are folks living here without cars to mean that it's easy to do so.
And there are a lot of people too, and I'm just basing this on anecdotal information, from my awareness of certain businesses in town. But there are a number of people who just rent cars on the weekends
Right,
when they
yeah.
need them,
I
you know?
I know that, I have a lot of friends who do that too.
Yeah.
They choose not to own a car because it's quite expensive.
And it's cheaper, of course, they figure, well, by the time you pay a note in insurance and maintenance, I can just, I just need it for a couple of days, and I don't even need it every weekend, so they do that. And I know we have, I think, only one car rental town, in
Enterprise
town.
used to be on Walnut
But
Street.
Enterprise
It's
is gone, but
yeah.
we've got Hertz on Claremont, and they do a banging
But
business.
But they
Avis
do
and
rent
Budget.
cars,
Yeah.
or do they just
Uptown.
rent trucks? I've just seen them.
They do cars.
They do cars
yeah.
as well, yeah.
That place on Valley Road,
Yeah.
they still
Yeah.
rent.
Avis and
cars.
Budget.
Budget's still there.
Avis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's two, one in
Yeah.
Upper Montclair, I guess, and
Right,
one in,
yeah.
on Claremont.
Yeah.
and we have Zipcar. We do have a
Mhm.
couple of Zipcar locations, so.
They get used a lot.
I don't get reports on the Zipcar usage. I could find out, because I know they're still there.
If they're there, they probably are getting used.
there-
If the
there's
rental
three
cars
there.
are getting,
There-
people are renting cars, that's
Yeah.
just another even more convenient
Mhm.
way to rent.
There's
There's three of
also
them.
like an Airbnb of cars called Turo that I know has been gaining popularity,
True.
where I could loan out my car
Oh,
via
Right.
the app.
Right.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done that before until the person I rented it from canceled it. There's always
I've
that
always been
danger.
hesitant. It's been tempting once or twice, but
I've
I've
done
just.
it. I've done it twice.
Okay.
One time was successful, the other time was not. So, okay. So item number 2, issue number 2, Montclair lacks local transit that is safe, consistent, predictable, and convenient. The response from the subcommittee is that Montclair is a suburban town that is well-served by public transportation, providing access to regional destinations. Township's 6 train stations and multiple bus routes provide access to public transportation for much of the community. Public transportation use, however, has changed dramatically after the COVID-19 pandemic, with both train and bus ridership in Montclair decreasing dramatically between 2019 and 2023, as indicated in tables 3 and 4. Train ridership levels decreased by over 40% at the Mountainside, Walnut Street, and Watchung train stations. Likewise, bus ridership decreased between 40 and 50%. We had the closure of the DeGamp Bus Company in April 2023 because, as they reported, ridership was only 20% of pre-pandemic levels. We've got those options have been replaced with a new transit service called Boxcar, which is a private regional bus company, which provides private local bus service to New York City with 4 pickup locations in Montclair. So the consensus of the subcommittee is while public transportation to localities, it should be locales outside of the township is good, the township lacks good intra-local transit options and weekend transit service. It goes on further, in recent years, local transit options have been enhanced through increased microtransit and vehicle sharing programs. Microtransit is a form of on-demand transportation that provides highly flexible routing and/or highly flexible scheduling of minibus vehicles shared with other passengers. I know that it's being used right now in Jersey City.
But not here, right?
Well, it's here for seniors.
Oh, that's
Montclair
Easy Ride.
Township has partnered with Essex County to contract with Easy Ride to provide on-demand shuttle service
For seniors,
services
yeah.
for older adults and people with disabilities.
Right.
And we have easy access to rideshare services such as Uber and Lyft, which provide a convenient alternative to the private automobile.
I'd just like to say that, I don't know if anybody looked at the flyer that Boxcar sent out. They sent out like a card. It's very expensive. I mean, it's certainly not for the average Montclarian, I thought, so.
But I bet you, and again, anecdotally,
Mhm.
People are using Uber and
Yeah.
Lyft a lot more percentage-wise than the people who were calling taxis before.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that has picked up some of that slack also. And clearly, our transportation modalities are changing,
Yeah.
evolving.
Mhm.
And I think a big part of it is the change in how people are taking transit. It's not going to the city to go to work every day. It's a lot more off-peak and weekend travel. So like while the data here shows that weekday peak ridership is down, weekend ridership is up about 15% from 2019.
And the last word hasn't been written on that weekday, because there's still a push to go back to 5 days a week. A
Mhm.
very strong
Yeah.
push, and it's, the companies want 5 days a week, the employees don't. And so we'll see who wins
Mhm.
that, but I see, in terms of traffic, I'm back in the office 5 days a week. Mondays and Fridays are light, but Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, it's worse than ever. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I- I ju-
we'll still see, how that pans out.
I'd just like to know where those buses are going. I'm not familiar with where are those buses that are listed here? Where do they go?
Which buses?
The buses that you've listed
Oh, the New
5
Jersey.
buses or so?
The New
Yeah.
Jersey Transit buses?
Yeah, where do they go?
Well-
Basically Newark and.
Well, one goes up to Willowbrook, and then it
Willowbrook.
goes into, they all end up in New York City.
Oh, they
It's
do?
just- there's
All of
different
these buses
routes.
go to New York? No.
No,
No.
some end in
I
I think
Newark.
some do go to Newark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I just want, well, where else do they go? They go to Newark, and then you're saying they go to Willowbrook, and?
I don't have the
You don't know,
bus.
yeah,
You
because
have to-
the college, maybe, yeah. I mean, because I don't know, personally, anecdotally, I think that most people not most people, but many people that live in Montclair want to go to New York. And I don't see that, I wonder about the usage of these buses that much.
Yeah.
I know, they don't go to New York. We need more, what I'm saying is I think we need more transit to New York, and one of the issues, it's mentioned later on, is the weekend service New York only has trains every 2 hours. It's very hard to go to the theater or to do anything, because you
Right.
have to wait hours for a train.
Right.
And I know we can't control that. And Penn Station is awful these days, to try to wait in Penn Station. It's a scary place.
But according to the camp,
Yeah.
they couldn't stay in business because
Yeah.
the ridership was
No.
down during the week to
Yeah.
sustain a regular, and they were around for over 150 years.
Which,
you know.
I often wonder about the weekend use then. I don't know, I'm a little skeptical about their rationale there for getting rid of the weekend buses. I mean, it strikes me they have a great real estate site. Might be more valuable as an area to develop real estate than to hang on to these buses.
But
Well, people are still using the train
Yeah,
to go over
They
to
do.
the city.
it's just
And
difficult.
they're just scheduling it accordingly.
Yeah.
They go when the trains run.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, all right. Mhm.
But I mean, I think, while it obviously isn't our decision on what NJ Transit does with that train line, right? Because Montclair is so heavily tied to those train tracks, any movement that they make is going to need Montclair to carry a heavy lift
Mhm.
and take a lot of the heat that's going to come from those gates going down on weekends. But I think that's a worthwhile thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
The gates were malfunctioning this past week, the one on Grove Street. I think it was no, it was last week. The end of last week, it was malfunctioning. Traffic was, it was horrible. It was just horrible. It was going up and down.
Well, I did, we had the New Jersey APA conference this week, and, or last week, and I did attend a session about public transportation and exactly what's going on. What's going on in Montclair is going on in other municipalities as well. And one of the presenters presented, and I believe this was Jersey City, was talking, or maybe it was Hoboken, but was presenting about the VIA program that they have, which is basically on-call transit. It's microtransit. And he never got back to me with the details, but instead of, what the city did there is they are basically subsidizing, rather than having buses, you make an appointment. It's kind of like Easy Ride. If you need to get picked up and taken someplace, you make an appointment, and the rates are very reasonable. Depends on, this was in Jersey City. It depended on where in the city you were. If you were in the core, it was $2 a trip. If you're outside the core, it was, an extra $2 or $3 to get to wherever your
But that was
endpoint
was that just within town?
It was just within Jersey City, and the city, paid for it. They're subsidizing it because it's Jersey City.
Mhm.
They provide public transportation. I don't think Montclair wouldn't be able to support something like that, I don't believe, or to subsidize it to that extent. I don't know.
But it might be something that, and I don't know whether this is even feasible, but it might be something that we could partner with other towns.
Right.
To support a network,
But the big issue that, I guess, that our subcommittee says, it was the lack of local intra-transportation options. There's actually quite a few options to get to the city, but it's much more difficult to get from one end of Montclair to the other end of Montclair. So that's just something to think about. The next issue was most of the New Jersey Transit bus stops are not sanctioned, but are courtesy stops that are unmarked and difficult to recognize. Not enough local buses, and few residents have knowledge of existing routes. It's probably true. And we said this is still a valid issue, and improved signage for bus stops and routes is needed. In addition, New Jersey Transit has created an app that makes it easier to find bus service and to track when the next bus is going to come. They do have that available. You just have to use it.
It can be a little unreliable at times, though.
Yeah. The app?
Yeah, I had a friend who was desperately trying to catch a train, and I'm looking at the app, and I'm like, it's there. It says it's right there, and he's like, I'm there. There's no train. But, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good when it works.
Yeah.
And it's helpful, but when it doesn't, it's,
Frustrating.
Very frustrating,
Yeah.
yes.
Number 4, some residents feel that there is inadequate weekend New Jersey Transit service as trains do not run north of the Bay Street station on the weekends. And this was felt that it was a valid issue as weekend train service is only provided at Bay Street train station. The committee noted that weekend bus service is still available.
I'd like to add that it's too long between trains, especially when you're coming home at night. You have to wait in Penn Station. If you miss
I
the
guess that's
train, it's
why.
2 hours to wait.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But
Or take an Uber.
take a
You always
Uber.
have that.
Hmm.
Montclair trains, number 5, Montclair train stations and bus stops do not provide adequate facilities such as racks or storage for cyclists. And the response was this is a valid issue as the only train station that has bicycle storage is the Bay Street train station. Bus stops at key intersections should include a bus shelter, bench seating, signage, and a design that is integrated with the streetscape.
I'd also like to add they should have, like they do for New York City subways, where they tell you when the next bus is coming, like some kind of electronic way.
Right.
I mean, I guess you're saying they have the app, but
Yeah,
not everybody, I guess, has a smartphone.
Right.
Maybe.
And I think some of the train stations do have bike racks, but they seem to have bike pieces now, because there's so much theft of
Yeah.
bicycle parts.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they're, oh yeah, you say Walnut has one. I think some of the other ones have them, and you see like a bicycle frame with no wheels, or bicycle no seat, because
Right.
it's whatever is easy to steal. So
Right.
it's, while they're there, you can't really use them.
Well, maybe
And
we
most-
need
and
more
those are just
security.
racks, there's no cover, right?
Right, there's no cover. It's
Yeah.
just, a place to lock your bike. And in that case, it's really locking the frame and that's it.
Issue number 7, Montclair has a lack of safe and easy non-automobile connections to
No,
amenities.
you missed number 6.
I did? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
6, street design, configuration, and sidewalk maintenance gives precedence to the needs of private cars and does not adequately serve the needs of pedestrians and cyclists. And the response was, this is a valid issue, and we should incorporate it into items 7 and 8 to kind of reduce the number of issues and consolidate a little bit.
Well, my only thought on that was, I don't necessarily agree that the street design configuration, et cetera, doesn't meet the needs of pedestrian. I think we have wonderful streets for pedestrians.
Well, sidewalk maintenance.
They need, well, they're getting
That-
on everybody.
that
Have
aspect
you heard?
of sidewalk maintenance.
They seem to be inspecting a lot of sidewalks these days, anecdotally,
Right.
I hear.
But most people who are out walking are walking in the street.
Yeah,
Because the
well, they could be.
sidewalks.
Yeah, the sidewalks can be bad,
Right.
yeah.
Surprisingly enough, I may politely disagree.
Oh.
I think there's a lot of things that can be done, especially around intersections, to
Right.
make sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure safer. Especially on the major roads, they're very wide crossings, and that's dangerous, narrowing down the intersections to prevent cars from quickly turning.
Yeah, that's part of our
Um,
safe streets
Yeah.
strategy. It's already built into the master plan, I think.
Yeah, but
Yeah, right.
it's still a valid concern
Yeah.
because those changes haven't come into
Yeah.
effect yet.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between what cyclists needs and what pedestrians need. Maybe you need to separate that out some way or other.
Possibly, I think the overall, the big distinction is they're not cars, right? And like, cars and trucks are the predominant road user, and they're the big things that can cause a lot of damage. Pedestrians and cyclists are the vulnerable users of the roadways, and so taking actions to protect pedestrians often protects cyclists as well, because they're both vulnerable road users.
And I think part of that is enforcement of speed limits. which
And I
don't
think we
do.
get into that.
Oh, we
So
do?
number 7, Montclair has a lack of safe and easy non-automobile connections to amenities, including schools, open spaces, train stations, town centers, etc. The subcommittee responded that this is a valid issue. The township should encourage micromobility, which includes a range of lightweight vehicles such as bicycles, e-scooters, mopeds, and the like, by providing more protected bike lanes that can be used by multiple forms of transportation. Micromobility vehicles, particularly electric micromobility vehicles, have increased in popularity due to their convenience, affordability, and eco-friendliness compared to traditional modes of transportation. Micromobility is anticipated to grow as commuting patterns change and local governments invest in safe travel lanes for micromobility vehicles. One such investment is the Essex Hudson Greenway, an approximately 9-mile, 100-foot wide linear corridor spanning Essex and Hudson counties through 8 municipalities. I don't need to go into all the details there, but the Greenway will create a linear, multimodal, recreational, and transit corridor enabling seamless walking, biking, and transit opportunities. So, essentially, this actually ties into what's going on elsewhere in the township. We're working on it, we have a Vision Zero task force. They're working on an action plan to basically create infrastructure improvements that lead to zero fatalities, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I think we're in sync with what's going on at a different section of the township, which is this Vision Zero task force, which will oversee a lot of the improvements to the township's streets and roads. 8, biking and walking for recreation and as a form of transportation is not safe enough. This is a valid issue. In 2022, there were 47 vehicle crashes involving pedestrians and 14 vehicle crashes involving bicyclists. I just did 1 year, because there's more data out there, but for the purposes of this, that's just an example, and it's a typical year for the township.
That's almost one pedestrian being hit by a car a week. Is that true?
I didn't make up the numbers.
Yeah, I know. That
Yeah.
seems
That's why we have
outrageous.
that's why there was they developed a Vision Zero task
yeah, yeah.
force that's going to
Mhm.
oversee improvements to our street network, working with the county, because the county has they're working on a similar plan.
Mhm.
So,
What, are they doing anything about enforcement of, speed limits and not going through stop signs? I mean, that seems like they should be doing that now, not waiting for a task force to do this Vision Zero
I can't
stuff.
talk,
Yeah, yeah.
I can't respond to how the
Yeah.
township's enforcing
Mhm.
things, but that is an issue. You
Mhm.
know, you can redesign all the streets and intersections that you want, but if there's no enforcement,
Right.
And if people who are using the streets, the pedestrians are not following safe practices.
Yeah, that's true,
Because
too.
I know everybody sees situations that are, that occur while they're driving,
Mhm.
that it's like, you have to actively avoid something because the pedestrian's not
Yeah.
looking where they're
Mhm.
going or not paying attention.
Mhm.
I think where Vision Zero comes at this as like a theoretical model is that it's the infrastructure that's leading to most of these car on not car conflict, right? And so a pedestrian is crossing at an unmarked crosswalk or at no crosswalk because the block is too long, or they're not using the sidewalk because it hasn't been maintained and they need a flat surface. They can't climb over tree roots. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. But then also at a fundamental level, right, the risk to anyone other than themselves is much greater in a motor vehicle, right? And the burden needs to be on the thing that's going to cause harm. And I am, as a cyclist and a pedestrian, responsible and careful in everything I do, right? But the risk is largely to myself. And when a motor vehicle is driving, the risk extends outwards to property and people. And so I think that's fundamentally kind of needs to be considered. It's not a one side.
Oh, it's
One of them is a lot
definitely-
riskier than the other.
it's
That's
definitely
and
not.
that feels frequently left behind.
Definitely not a one-sided.
yeah.
Not a one-sided issue, but it's not. But it is a multiple, a multifaceted
Yeah.
issue.
And I think Vision Zero does a good job of saying that by making the streets differently structured from an engineering perspective, you can change behavior without enforcement.
And I think part of
Yeah.
that too, is educating people
Yeah.
too, because I see examples like people taking their children out of their car on the traffic side of the street. Their door is wide open, their rear is sticking out in the street,
Yeah.
and not all of our streets are that wide when you've got parking on both sides, and and you've got cars going both ways. It makes it that's risky behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
There's people who, it always amazes, on Ridgewood Avenue in Glen Ridge, they have wide lanes. And why people insist on walking on the line that separates the pedestrian from the bike lane and pedestrian area from the car path, it's like, you've got all this area, why don't you walk in the middle, and these and when they get to the intersections, because the intersections, the lines go for turn, they don't pay attention. They don't pay attention, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but they're just examples of where, if, I was always taught, you just don't step off the street. You look both ways.
both
You
ways.
make sure, because that car is more dangerous to you than you are to it.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like people don't get that education anymore. There's this entitlement that, hey, I'm a pedestrian, I can step out in the street, you've got to stop for me, and if you don't, then I'll sue you, And so the educational portion of it, I think, is important also. Like I said, it's a multifaceted issue.
And I'd just like to go back to enforcement, okay? So I live on the corner of Walnut Street and Walnut Crescent, and nobody, well, maybe 4 out of 5 cars will blow through the stop sign. They don't even roll through the stop sign. They openly don't adhere to the stop sign. If you had a policeman that was stationed on that corner for one day and issued tickets, he'd earn his weekly pay
Yeah.
with the tickets. So I don't know, but you tell people this and nobody does anything. I've said this over and over and over again at different meetings, and nothing happens. So I feel like one of the issues is that the town doesn't listen to residents when they have a real issue that they bring to the attention of the council, or I guess it's the council. It doesn't get addressed.
I think there are capacity issues, and then I think about how enforcement is done. It's a cop then pulling through, kind of having to not really follow the stop sign because they need to pull the person over in front of them, and that's difficult at a fundamental level because you need to then catch up with the person who's driving through the street. And it's challenging to do just a cop enforcing. It takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of resources, and
Sometimes all you gotta do is park near the intersection.
yeah, and that certainly helps. But we only have so many cop cars, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
Hey, Glen Ridge parks empty cars around town, and so do,
Yeah.
so do other towns. too.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways to skin the cat.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice things about the task force coming about for Vision Zero is it'll be able to consider all that. And so I think a close working relationship is a good idea.
When they changed traffic patterns, it was nice when they were putting up the flashing lights,
Yeah.
so that everybody got used to, hey, there's a stop sign here, or it's a four-way stop sign now. And we've changed some of the traffic patterns, but like today, when I was coming home from work, I was coming Bloomfield Avenue, the intersection, you've got a turn lane there. And one lane, is supposed to have a left turn lane. It's painted in the street, you can't see it. So if you're not familiar with it, you figure, and you've been through there before, you figure it's 2 lanes, you can go straight, you don't have to worry about it. And I don't know if there's one sign, or maybe there is one, but it wasn't something that was obvious, and because it was raining, it was difficult to see
Right.
what the pattern was. And, in some cases you do, I think, when you institute changes, you've got to highlight them for a little while and put the little extra effort into it so that people understand, hey, there's a change here. And then periodically you can go back, and enforce it. And you'd force it just like they do on the highways, and you park near, you put a car there. People see a police car, they will pay more attention, automatically. And if they think that this is a, someplace that people are paying attention to, then they will, be careful and become used to it as a matter of habit.
So, moving on to the recommendations that were in this section of the plan. The first recommendation was to establish a network for pedestrians and cyclists. And the subcommittee agreed that still is a valid recommendation. Recommendation number 2, upgrade transit service. The subcommittee realized that this is really beyond the capacity of the township, because it's DOT. I'm not sorry, DOT, it's New Jersey Transit. Not always the easiest agency to deal with, but to support them in their efforts, and to support them in improving service and the frequency of service, particularly on weekends in Montclair. Number 3, improve circulation for private cars. The subcommittee response to this was that the impacts from increasing deliveries and short-term parking for car share services on local streets are leading to poor air quality, considerably more traffic congestion, and extra stress on local infrastructure. Trucks and cars frequently double park on local streets to make deliveries, creating congestion on local streets. Township streets should be redesigned to provide more loading areas and more short-term parking to create safer circulation for all vehicles. Parking fees should be reconfigured to discourage vehicles from parking on the street and encourage vehicles to park in the township parking decks. Additional enforcement of traffic and parking laws is needed. I don't know if there are any comments about that, but I think it mimics everything that we've said tonight. Number 4, increase shuttle service. Response: there is a need for better intramunicipal transit service. The township should evaluate the need to resume jitney service to bring local commuters to train stations. The question is, should traditional shuttle services be replaced with microtransit? Again, this goes to what we talked about before. Let's look into it. Maybe there are better options. Number 5, create enhanced bus stops. Enhanced bus stops that include shelter, seating, and signage should be provided at key intersections. That makes sense. Number 6, provide illuminated crosswalk signs at unsignalized intersections. This is a valid recommendation that has been successfully implemented at key intersections within the township and should be continued as necessary. It should start with improving pedestrian safety by providing illuminated crosswalk signs and should be expanded to including providing additional four-way stops, bump outs, and curb extensions, and narrowing streets. I have to apologize. I know there's some very poor grammar in here, but yeah, I had a little difficulty correcting the original memo from a PDF.
Janice, when you talk about illuminated signs, you're talking about those yellow signs that light up with the flashing
Yeah.
bulb so you can press the button?
Yes.
That's what you mean?
Yep,
Okay.
those are the illuminated
Yep.
ones. 7, implement a complete streets network. The response, it should be amended to include in accordance with the Montclair Safe Complete Streets Implementation Plan. Number 8, create a street design guide. I think we did achieve that with the Complete Streets Implementation Plan. Number 9 is create a bicycle master plan. And the response is this should be incorporated into recommendation number 1, because we already talked about the need for improved bike lanes. Number 10, expand the number of designated transit villages in the township. The response was, in order to be designated a transit village, the zoning for the area around the train station must be changed to allow for additional density. I gather from the responses we've heard so far that this is no longer valid as a significant additional development around the 5 train stations north of the Bay Street station is not proposed. Unless, that was my feeling, unless there's some disagreement.
I agree.
I don't know that we're far enough along in the process to say that that's the case. I think it's a premature.
I'll put a question mark
Yeah.
because we haven't evaluated the different neighborhoods yet. And then the 11th recommendation was to establish a township-wide street classification system. I mean, we did in the master plan, it really is not heavily used because it was tied to a form-based code, and we've never advanced a form-based code, so it's really not that important. And I don't think it has to be a recommendation.
I have a question about that. So what you're talking about there is when you identify streets as a local street, a neighborhood street, a transit street, whatever, that's in the
Yeah,
master plan?
arterial streets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I never understood what was the use of designating those streets? Because, for example, certain streets, trucks can go down. To me, a similar street, trucks can't go down. That they're both the same designated street type. So what was the purpose of,
Well, it has nothing to do with trucks.
Well, I'm just giving you as an example. Is
Yeah.
there, if you're named a arterial street, what does
It
that
has to do
really
with
mean?
volume. It's really, basically,
It's
it
just
reflects the
saying-
volume.
It's just identifying what exists already, that you get a lot of volume in this street, you don't get much volume in this street, and that's basically what that designation does.
That was really how it was determined
Yeah,
on volume of traffic.
Yeah.
And then we had the different, volume of traffic, and then we had the land use layer, and
Mhm.
that created this very
Mhm.
complex system, which if you do a form-based code, it's based on how you classify the streets and how you classify the neighborhoods.
As to what kind of development you would put
so
on
that's
that
the
street.
tie-in.
But we
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah.
We
We
never
don't do
did
that.
that.
Yeah.
We're a fully developed municipality, and.
And we
didn't-
talked about it, and, it
Fine.
just didn't work out.
It can still be useful in helping kind of figure out things like the bicycle master plan and the bike networks. So
Well,
it does still
I
have a
think it's-
use because it indicates where would be safer to ride.
Yeah.
So I know folks who do the Montclair bike bus, which we discussed at this meeting, use that as kind of a starting point to try to figure out safe routes to get kids to school. And so it's good to have. It's not necessarily a master plan priority. We have it.
We have it, right? So
yeah,
we've
yeah,
accomplished
But
it.
I think it does still have value.
Okay, good.
But since we're talking about transit and mobility, I do think that there should be some rationalization about why buses can go down these streets and they can't go down, well, they can. Buses can go everywhere. And why should buses be able to go on small residential streets? I don't think that's right. Or trucks, as I said, some streets allow trucks. Same street, same looking street, in my view, doesn't allow trucks. what's the rationale? I think I don't understand the rationale. I think somebody should be looking at that on a townwide basis and trying to figure out, why is this done the way it is done?
And I can't answer.
Yeah.
I do believe it comes out of the engineer's office, engineer's department. They're the ones that determine, the truck lanes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think trucks should be going down small residential streets, and they do.
On a regular basis.
Yeah.
Obviously, if
Yeah.
somebody's getting a delivery,
Well, that's different, yeah.
That's
yeah,
different.
Yeah.
but
Would there be a place in the master plan for encouraging the municipality to ban tractor trailers from streets below a certain classification? Like, is that something that would make sense? Because that feels
Yeah.
like it doesn't impact deliveries of,
I think as a
necessary-
practical matter, though,
yeah.
that, the logistics providers look at the routes and try and find the most
Certainly,
effective
yeah.
routes. And small streets are not effective routes for tractor trailers,
Well, they can be, believe me. They
Well,
do go that way.
but they're not designated by the companies. From a commercial standpoint, they're not designated routes. They're the drivers, more or less, going off the
Waves or
reservation.
something. Yeah, yeah,
because
which they do, yeah.
Or because they've been blocked going somewhere else, or somebody gets lost, because that always, for some reason, all the trucking companies, they have these pre-established routes. And how trucks end up on the parkways in New York, and stuck under overpasses and stuff on a regular basis, I just never understood. How do you get lost if your company is telling you, here's the route that you gotta go?
Not
But it
following the
happens.
route.
But it happens, it's the drivers, So I think that's a large part of how these trucks wind up on these small streets, because the companies are not sending them down those streets. I know that when Pathmark was in town, Pathmark had its own in-house trucking, that, there were only certain routes that they could come in to make deliveries to that store, along Grove Street and along Bloomfield Avenue, and that was it. Those were the routes that they were told, and that's the common practice for the trucking industry, so. It's very hard, and I think what happens is the town doesn't invest money in saying you can't go on that street, because maybe they know that these streets are not regularly traveled, so there's really no strict prohibition, and so, there's nothing to enforce to get them to stop. So, the town would have to really invest in evaluating all of that and put some focus on it, and then the question becomes, well, how does that balance out in terms of the effort that we do with the result that we'll get, so it's, again, there's a lot of this that we're talking about in this particular section that strikes me as it goes way beyond what the planning board does, and it requires some thinking outside of the box, and it also requires that other areas, other responsibilities in the town council and the engineering departments, and all sink in to really make something work, in its best manner. So, and we're going to get all of that done. We're going to encourage all these people to do that. But
It is a safety and quality of life issue.
yeah,
So it does matter. You're talking about Vision Zero, get these big trucks going down small streets with kids not expecting them to be there, that's a problem. Anyway.
yeah, and a lot of the things that we're talking about here, again with the intertown mobility, well, the same can be said for our neighbors too. And if we had a way to work in conjunction with them to establish a network, the way that we cooperate with fire services, so why don't we cooperate with transportation services more? And, because there's people who live in Verona, certainly want to get to New York, on an easy basis, and I'm sure they would like to have easy access to our train station, you know? And we would like, you know, people who live in Montclair would like to go into Bloomfield to have things done. You know, there's a lot of new businesses have opened up, you know, and so it's, there could be a win-win kind of thing, you know, with a little bit of cooperation and thinking outside of the box.
Should you put that in here, that we would like to see more regional cooperation?
I think it's something that we
Yeah.
can consider, you know,
Yeah.
and again, thinking outside of the box, there might be other things that, you know, besides that, you know. But it's not just thinking, okay, inside of our borders, you know, anymore, because there's just some things that are too big for us to do, you know, like New Jersey Transit, you know. But if the communities in the county got together and said, hey, we need this or we want that, you know, that's a bigger impact on New Jersey Transit than just Montclair asking for it, you know, so.
Okay. Any other comments on this section? All right. Then I will be reaching out to the other subcommittees shortly, hopefully when we're fully back online, and start meeting again. So I think the next item on the agenda are the bills.
And I would move to approve the bills.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right, if there's nothing else, move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you, everyone.